He hadn't planned anything special for that night. The invitation arrived at the last minute. A coworker insisting he show up to a gathering, a mix of business, distant acquaintance, and forced socializing. All day long, he hesitated. He thought about refusing, about inventing some excuse, about sticking to the quiet routine he knew so well. But for a reason he couldn't quite explain, he ended up accepting. As the sun disappeared behind the buildings, he stood in front of his open wardrobe, staring at the same shirts as always. None looked right, but none looked wrong either. He put one on, then another, and finally returned to the first. The night didn't deserve any extra effort, he thought. He grabbed the same watch, the same shoes, the same jacket, everything identical, everything predictable. It was only when he was about to leave that the detail appeared. On the corner of his dresser, half forgotten, was a perfume bottle he almost never used. He barely remembered when he had received it, or from whom. Maybe a birthday, maybe some end-of-year occasion where gifts were exchanged out of obligation. The glass was elegant, weighty, with discreet lines. It picked it up, turned the bottle under the bedroom light, and, without thinking too much, pressed a sprayer. The air changed. The scent spread in silence, filling the space with a depth that surprised him. It wasn't sweet, not aggressive, not youthful. It carried something serious, nocturnal, as if it had been created for moments when something important and invisible was about to happen. For a second, he thought about switching back to his usual fragrance, the one that never drew attention. But there was something in this scent that held him. It wasn't generic. It wasn't neutral. It felt like a presence. He sprayed it on his wrists, his neck, a little on the collar of his shirt. He looked at himself in the mirror, not finding anything extraordinary in his own reflection. The summer face, the same tired eyes, the same slightly tense posture. Still, the feeling was different, as if, outside the door, someone completely unknown was about to walk into his life, wearing his body. He left. The city was alive, vibrating with lights and noises that no longer impressed him. The place for the meeting was a sophisticated bar, hidden on a street that looked ordinary from the outside. Dark facade, discreet entrance, muffled sound coming from within. When he pushed the door open, the first thing he felt was the contrast. The world outside suddenly felt distant, as if he had left more than just the street behind. The interior was lit by low lights, golden reflections sliding across metal and glass. People moved in groups, glasses in hand, muted laughter rising and falling. He spotted his coworker waving from a table at the back and started walking. But as he moved through the room, something strange began to happen. Eyes turned toward him for brief moments, not dramatically, but in quick, discreet, almost stolen glances. A woman by the bar paused mid-sentence for a fraction of a second as he passed. A man leaning on the counter lifted his eyes from his phone and followed him with his gaze. He didn't understand. His clothes were the same as always. His expression, too. It took a few minutes for him to realize. It wasn't him. It was what surrounded him. The perfume had created a kind of silent field around his presence. It wasn't a scent that invaded the room. It was subtler, revealing itself only to those close enough. But for those who felt it, it could not be ignored. It was like a detail that couldn't be named, an element that made him feel more. Defined there in the shadows, he sat down with the group, trying to ignore the strangeness. The conversation started out superficial, as always. He replied automatically, his mind a little distant. Then a woman, seated on the opposite side of the table, leaned slightly forward. "What perfume are you wearing?" she asked, her tone mixing curiosity with something he couldn't quite identify. He took a second to answer. He couldn't remember the name. He just said it was an old gift, something he didn't use very often. She gave a small, discreet smile. "It suits you," she said. "It gives off a different feeling." The conversation went on. But something at the table had shifted. More questions were directed at him. More attention followed his answers. Comments that would usually disappear into the air now seemed to land. It was as if, suddenly, his presence had been outlined more sharply in that dim scene. As the night went on, he noticed something else. People he didn't know began to approach. An older, elegant man, who had been with another group, walked over. He said he recognized him from some company event. He started a conversation about an upcoming project, asked his opinion, and listened with unusual attention. "You have an interesting way of looking at things," the man said. "We need more people like that higher up." He didn't know how to respond. He hadn't tried to impress anyone. While the man talked, one detail drew his attention. Distance. The man stood just close enough to clearly catch the scent. Across the room, a woman he'd never seen before approached the table under the pretext of speaking to someone else. As she passed behind his chair, she made a brief, playful remark. "Someone here smells really good tonight." He felt the weight of that sentence more than he expected, not because of the compliment, but because of what was left unsaid. The perfume was opening small cracks, creating contact points, making him more noticeable. The night began to fragment into moments that, on any other day, would have slipped by. A toast in which his name was mentioned. A joke that, this time, was heard. An invitation to join a smaller group heading somewhere else. An invitation that never came when he was just another neutral face in the crowd. Later, outside, on the damp sidewalk, one of the company directors, who had always greeted him with distance, approached with unusual ease. The director said his name without hesitation. That alone was rare. "You were the one who mentioned that idea about reorganizing the service flow, right? I want you to send me that in detail," the director said. "I think we can talk about it on a different level." And again, that physical distance, just a few centimeters closer than standard. Close enough for the perfume to quietly fill the space between them. That night, when he got home, he loosened his tie and looked at himself in the mirror. The face was the same, but the gaze had changed. There was a new awareness there, that something invisible had been operating in his favor. He lifted the collar of his shirt and breathed in the scent one last time, now weaker, mixed with the smell of the night. He thought about everything that had happened in just a few hours. The conversations, the invitations, the small openings that seemed to appear without him forcing anything. He'd always believed that only big gestures changed a life, big decisions, big risks. Now he began to suspect that sometimes a subtle detail quietly shifts everything. In the days that followed, the effect of that night didn't fade. Messages came in. Invitations were repeated. The director kept his word. Meetings were scheduled. Doors that had always been closed began to open a crack. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. Everything slowly, quietly. He kept wearing the perfume. Not every day, not as some superstitious charm, but on nights when he felt something could happen, at events where, before, he would have gone unnoticed. In moments when he needed to remind himself that there was more to him than the image he was used to seeing. Over time, the smell stopped being just a fragrance. It became a symbol of the man he was becoming. Of the realization that the way the world sees us is not always rational, not always logical, and rarely fully conscious. If someone asked him, years later, what had changed his trajectory, he would never simply say a perfume. Because it wasn't just that, it was the courage to leave the house when he could have stayed. It was the accumulation of silent effort over years. It was coincidence, yes, but also the way he responded to it. Even so, deep down, he knew. That night would not have unfolded the same way without the scent that surrounded him, opening invisible paths. A scent that didn't talk, didn't argue, didn't introduce itself. It simply existed, and by existing, it changed everything. He went on, climbing steps, entering rooms he had never imagined. But whenever he prepared for a night that felt like it could change something again, he repeated the same gesture in the silence of his room. He picked up the bottle, looked at it for a few seconds, and without any fanfare, pressed the sprayer. The world outside didn't hear the sound, but inside, he knew. From that moment on, everything could change again. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. See you next time.